hands. And we look forward to seeing the work around town, which of course those of you visiting will know, or if you don't know, we'll remind you, is the cleanest, biggest town in Ireland.
Correct.
Yeah. So we come to the stage of the evening where we're going to introduce this work here by John Gibbons, standing here very quiet. And for this job, I'd like to call up Mick O Dea from the back of the hall. Mick O Dea is from County Clare. He's well known as a painter. He distinguished himself in his painting as a portrait painter. And in the 80s, and I've said this before to Mick, in the 80s he did a series of paintings around Dublin, around the art scene in Dublin, of all the ne'er-do-wells who hung around. And that is an exhibition of those portraits waiting to be shown as a group of work. He also has distinguished himself as a landscape painter here in Ireland, but also overseas. And in the last few years, he has, like a few artists, he has taken a liking to the wild coast of North Mayo, and he has done some work up there, and I think he'll probably continue to do that. I said he's originally from Innis. He's been a distinguished teacher. He's also been very active in the RHA, and he was a member of the RHA and a member of the various committees there who undertook the redevelopment of the Gallagher building at Ely Place to make it into to fulfill its final vision of state-of-the-art gallery. As I said, Mick is he likes Mayo a lot, so it's nice to be able to welcome him back to Westport.
Have my piece of paper. I know it's a long evening. Try and make it as short as possible. I'm delighted to have been invited by the two Johns, John McHugh and John Gibbons, to launch this exhibition tonight of John Gibbons' work. John happens to be from Ennis in County Clare, the same place as me, and we have a number of things in common, and amongst the things that we have in common is a love for County Mayo. I think we've kind of beaten a retreat up from what might be maybe the over-consumerised county and the great beauty spots that in order to access them you have to park your car and pay a tenner here and a fiver there, whereas there's something called Mayo where you just don't do that, and long may that last, because it's great to have the landscape interpreted for you, but it's much nicer to just experience it yourself and interpret it yourself without having to go to an interpretive centre. That's my feeling on it anyway. I told my brother John that I was opening an exhibition for John Gibbons, and it turns out that my brother John, who runs a pub in Ennis, sat in the same room as John Gibbons here. And I said to him, yes, I said, I'm opening an exhibition for John Gibbons in Westport. And he said, Stone. And I said, Stone? And he said, yeah, Stone. And I thought, God, he must have got that name because he's a well-known sculptor. I said, no, he didn't get that because he's a well-known sculptor. He said, because he was as tough as nails. And he was a very successful member of the Ennis Boxing Club, and apparently was willing to take at least four pucks in order to get in close enough to deliver his own one. And so I think there's something of that type of personality that is required to make sculpture and to be as dogged, determined, and in fact creative and successful as John Gibbons is. John is regarded as one of the finest sculptors working in Britain today. I met him for the first time in Winchester in 1997 when he was the professor of sculpture in Winchester College of Art. I had read about him before that in a review on the Guardian newspaper, which described his work, which has been shown in the Serpentine Gallery sometime before that. It just talked about the contribution that he's made to contemporary sculpture, and also about the fact that he was somebody who still crafted and made and fabricated the pieces of work that were shown. They've always being identified with strength, with that kind of embracing of industrial Britain, the dockland area, the material that he was able to use, recycle and reincorporate into his work. Over the last number of years, he's exhibited extensively throughout both Britain, the United States and Europe. And probably one of the highlight exhibitions was in one of my favourite galleries in London, which is the National Portrait Gallery. And the National Portrait Gallery gave a show exclusively to John's sculptures, which is very interesting because we're not talking about representational likenesses here in the work that he does. Rather, there was something about the spirit of the mask-like shapes on plinths that have an amazing, the echoes of a human presence. Maybe, in the same way that Auerbach can build up a head, the painter, in a particular configuration and number of strokes. John has an amazing ability to construct these heads, and one of the things that was distinctive about them as well was the fact that you could look in through them and see how they were constructed, which is a really very important element in his work. He always likes to leave it open-ended so that you can actually follow the process. The drawings to me are a revelation. And I first saw him working on the drawings in the RHA gallery where he did a residency back in 2010. It's very interesting to see that quite a number of them are named after particular locations in Achill, in Ballycastle, Dublin. They have a name, but that is where the series that come from that particular place were developed, usually over an intense period of maybe 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes more. But they usually come about as a consequence of thinking long and hard about them, of accumulating various types of material, particularly different types of paper, paints, and it's almost as if he's working on a campaign where he has to kind of stock, as a lot of artists do anyway when they're doing a residency, but a lot of logistical things have to be put to bed, bills have to be paid, all sorts of things in order to have a window of opportunity in order to produce the work. When he produces, when he's there then, when he goes to a location, particularly in Mayo, he would traverse the countryside, walk, cycle, just take it in, and then work in the studio. I asked him about the drawings, are they paintings, but he's very insistent that they are drawings. He uses colour, and it's as if colour is in the hands of a sculptor whose work is, a lot of sculptural work is monochromatic. John has a range of work that has been painted on, and that is as much from finding some of the objects that he welds that already have the colour, but he uses the colour as if he has got it in his hands for the first time. He builds up the layers. There's fantastic texture. He's very innovative in the type of material that is being employed, the surfaces that he's working on. Always being conscious of the fact as well that it's archivally 100%. I mean, it's been said about maybe a lot of 20th century art that the biggest industry in the 21st century would be the preservation of 20th century art. I think it's because so much of the spontaneity meant that things were being put together without maybe much consideration for its longevity. Maybe by virtue of the fact that so many artists felt that they were the last generation to ever produce anything anyway, particularly with the Cuban crisis and so many other things. There was a kind of a sense of, we're in our the human species is in their last run. Hence, it doesn't really matter. However, John employs that kind of spontaneous approach, very directly manipulating the materials. He's a sculptor who makes drawings using the same techniques, using the same range of processes on the drawing as he subjects his material to, his metal material. And what we're left with are quite exciting images that are very innovative in terms of how they're put together. Very colourful, they have consistency about them, and sometimes when they're framed like these ones here, they just have a beautiful elegance. I can't emphasise enough John's importance. He's one of our great exports culturally. We've got Bob Geldof over there, maybe saying too much often about things, But John, in my estimation, is up there with many of our major cultural exports. He's a visual artist and a sculptor that has reinvigorated the object and the making and the fabrication of sculpture. He's highly respected in Britain and in Ireland. It's a bit like the Tony O'Malley story, where Tony, it's interesting because Tony has a connection with Clare Island. His people came from there. John Gibbons' people came from there. Patrick Gibbons, his grandfather, came from Clare Island. John who spent his time in Westport in the 1950s up until the age of 10 or 11, coming here every summer. When I look at some of his pieces, I think of Celtic reliquaries, that contain the bones of saints or fragments of very important people in the religious sense. And I think that feeds into a lot of the objects that John makes, and it's very interesting that he has an ancestor, Hennigan, is it, or Heenahan, who was the contractor for the chapel up on top of Croagh Patrick. So when I see some of John's sculpted pieces, his metal pieces, I draw that direct reference. And I mean, we have the sculptures at the wall here, which you've got Pilgrim, you've got Corpus, there's always that sacred quality about John Gibbons' works, his sculptural pieces in particular. You come and you contemplate them, and there is always a feeling that even though they are made by putting metal together, by welding metal together, that they contain something more than the sum of their parts. It's a strength, and it's a quality that really is evident in his sculpture. His drawings I just love them as well. I love the freshness, the spontaneity of them. It's interesting that, John Healy, the great Mayo man, convinced Matt Gallagher, the Sligo construction man, to build the art gallery in Dublin, which John McHugh, the great facilitator of the artists, an artist himself who's highly respected, and hence can get someone like John Gibbons to come. Anyway, we're going around in a circle. John Healy persuaded Matt Gallagher to build the RHA gallery. He said, okay, you've made a lot of money out of construction, let's do something for your country, let's do something for the visual arts. That's why the RHA gallery exists in Dublin today. And it's interesting that a contractor, McAlpine, and we all know about McAlpine's Fusiliers, it was his collection of sculpture in the Tate Gallery, where incidentally John Higgins' work has been collected by the Tate, and he's got a fine piece in there that was shown in the Serpentine Gallery. But anyway, it was McAlpine's collection of sculptures that triggered the thing in John Gibbons that this is the way forward for him. I suppose McAlpine was a builder of buildings that was conscious about the fact that you do need sculptures to be part of that. And I just love that connection, that it was really a builder's collection of sculptures that triggered the response in John Gibbons that made him the artist that he is today. So it's a great pleasure for me to finally declare this exhibition open and congratulate John.